I really want to encourage everybody to get involved in right on crime in your state. I think there are a number of very important reasons to do so, apart from the fact that it's very good legislation and it makes the country a better place. It's a perfect fit for center-right think tanks. Now, I made over the years, made all the wrong assumptions on criminal justice questions. I trusted the experts. I assumed that when there was a government program called Reducing Crime, that must be what it was doing. That prisons must be doing what prisons said they were doing, that I should trust the unionized prison guards to have the best interests of other people at heart, including taxpayers. I mean, all the things that we'd laugh at if it was the welfare system or the public school system. You know, we measured inputs, we're doing really well. Look at all the people we have in prison. Instead of measuring outputs about whether crime was reduced, and at a reasonable cost. So that at least me and some other conservatives sort of assumed somebody else was taking care of this. And the problem is that somebody else we thought was taking care of this were a bunch of government workers and prosecutors and prison guards who, oddly enough, organized themselves around making their lives easy rather than perhaps solving the problem. And again, we measured input rather than outputs. Now, the fact that we've ignored it and we let either the left come into play in silly things or the self-interested unionized government workers to structure things on their own behalf gives us an incredible running room. In each of your states, there's a tremendous amount of easy stuff that can be done. You know, stuff. Take a look at what Texas and Georgia and Pennsylvania are looking, and you can take baby steps or significant steps. There's a lot of running room there. There's a lot of easy things to do that nobody's focused on. The other one is credibility. We have credibility, the left doesn't. Okay? I mean, we can talk about having fewer people in prison and people don't roll their eyes. It's very important that Texas did this first. I testified in Florida in the legislature about some of the ideas on right on crime, and you could see that Republicans going, I don't understand this. And as soon as I said Texas and Oklahoma, they breathed this incredible sigh of relief. And so the fact that the first states out of the box are states like Texas and Oklahoma, what if Vermont had done it right the first time, right? How would we have sold anybody on that, even if it was true? But Texas, okay. And conservatives can come to the table here and make a case that a liberal saying the same thing would not be listened to. And thanks to the work that has been done in Texas, we have some years of some progress that we can point to. It's not, here's a really good idea, it ought to work in theory, trust us, eat this. But rather, this is something that you've seen work, and we know that it has worked. The other one is it's a tremendous opportunity for press and for outreach for conservative center-right groups. This is man bites dog story. Conservative group argues that the police aren't always right, that the prison guards aren't always right, that not everybody ought to be in prison. It's counterintuitive to what the establishment press thinks we're all about. Not only it's counterintuitive at all, but we're center-right people. We want the government to cost less to be effective. We want to maximize liberty. I get all excited about 15% capital gains taxes. I mean, what about taking all of somebody's life for years and years and years? We really ought to be careful about when we do that. That's a big deal when we make that decision. And we as conservatives ought to be most sensitive to depriving people of liberty and limit it to the people who we really can't afford to be out in the general population. And I think as conservatives, we can be very serious about being tough on crime, about making sure criminals are punished, about punishing them right away, and yet at the same time not necessarily have quite as many 75-year-olds in prison as somebody else might want. What is going to reduce crime? What is going to make us safer? And how do we deal with that? So as a center-right group, just think of all the press guys you deal with who think they know what you're going to say when you call them on the phone, when you invite them to a event, to a speech, to a conference, when you send them a press release. What are they expecting? Okay, This is not what they're expecting. And I've done press conferences with the head of the NAACP and other folks, and the press is just giggling out there about, oh, this is so interesting, that you've got these two different, and then the guy from the NAACP, we agree on a number of things and reduce the number of people in the press, and then he goes, and then we take all the money we save and we give it to the teachers union. And I say, wait a minute, we're cool up until then, but let's work together on the things that we can work on. But again, the press finds this endlessly fascinating. And also, it's an opportunity to speak to people that otherwise in your communities you wouldn't get a chance to reach out to. When I was working with the working group in DC years ago, it took me a while, but not all conservatives have gotten interested in criminal justice reform. And I eventually figured out I was the only person in this little room with like 12 people that were meeting fairly regularly who either hadn't been in prison or didn't have an immediate relative in prison. And I'm all in favor of people working off of personal experience and so on, but we are going to have to enlist more people from the center-right than just the ones who've actually been in prison recently or had children who spent some time in federal penitentiaries. And I think that this is an opportunity. I mean, I put some of these on shares, and at the SPN meeting I'll put more out, because I think this is a really cool map. This is the map. The red states have a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, and ought to be 24 and 14 blue states with Democratic governors, Democratic legislatures complete. The others are split. As center-right think tanks, one, in the red states, we ought to be able to move stuff very quickly. But even in the blue states, if it's a right-of-center think tank putting an idea forward, then liberal Democrats who might well buy into it but wouldn't want to lead it. I mean, today there was an announcement from the White House. They'd love to have an energy tax if the Republicans recommended it. Okay? So if you put your fingerprints on the murder weapon, we'll do it in the middle class. But we wouldn't do it ourselves. We didn't think of it. Hint, hint, Again, even in blue states, there are opportunities for left-right alliances. And I can't stress how much, because I do a lot of partisan stuff and I mean to the other team from time to time, the left finds it hysterical, fascinating, endlessly fascinating when guys on the right and the left can work together. And remember, they're always telling us we should be bipartisan and do compromise and nonsense like that. This is an opportunity where we actually can do something. The reason why most discussions in Washington, D.C. about bipartisan compromise or nonsense is that they're remembering when Nixon wanted a bigger government and Teddy Kennedy wanted a much bigger government, and so every year they compromise on somewhat bigger. Okay? Since they're moving in the same direction, compromise was easy. We now, thanks to Goldwater, Reagan, Gingrich, Tea Party, have a modern Republican Party that wants lower taxes and finally less spending. And Ryan, I should have included Ryan. And a Democratic Party that wants more taxes and higher spending. Somebody wants to move west, somebody wants to move east, and a compromise would look like what? Okay. Well, this is one of those issues where we can have, if not compromise, I think frankly agreement rather than compromise.